All right, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Michael Sandel. He's a faculty member at Mississippi State University's College of Forest Resources, and we're going to hear more about his work in a minute. But he's also an officer in charge with the Public Health Medical Group with the Alabama Air National Guard and holds several faculty adjunct positions at universities across the country. So he sounds very busy and doing very interesting work, and we're excited to hear about it. So take it away.
Well, thanks, Nick. And I just want to take a minute to thank all of the organizers for the Fish Health Symposium for the invitation to have my lab share the research with the group. It's a very exciting opportunity. I'm joining you from Teton National Park. My family just started a vacation here for the next week, and really excited to communicate this research and then get on to some sightseeing afterwards. Yeah, as Nick said, my name is Mike Sandel, and working in the Wildlife, Fisheries, and Aquaculture Department at Mississippi State University, where the majority of my lab is focused on biodiversity conservation. This map here shows the diversity of freshwater fishes across North America, and we're located right in the middle of Mississippi, so it's a hotspot of freshwater fish biodiversity, as well as other aquatic organisms. So basically, if it lives in the water, this area in the southeastern United States is the hotspot for diversity: snails, crayfishes, turtles, fish, and other creatures. You can learn more about the research that we do by following the QR code here to my lab website. And I'll tell you a little bit about how my lab research has evolved over time. So this is a small project that was just defended by a graduate student of mine on an endangered fish that's only found within 5 miles of a single creek. This is one of the smallest freshwater fishes in North America. It's known as the spring pygmy sunfish. And David Pounders just defended this a few weeks ago, maybe a week ago, and is now doing an internship with Fish and Wildlife Service, and soon will be doing his PhD at the University of Southern Mississippi. Some of the findings of his research were that this endangered species has gone through a population bottleneck, and that a lot of conservation action is needed to preserve it. A lot of my students have ended up in agency careers or PhD positions at prestigious institutions. Matthew Scott will be joining us in a minute to talk about biodiversity at a different level, not necessarily in the southeastern United States, but more about biodiversity of microbes living in a hyper-diverse fish community of the Amazon. And so my lab has evolved from one focused just on conservation of fishes to one that involves public health as well. So this is falling neatly under the umbrella of the One Health Initiative sponsored by the CDC. And as a veterinary community, I'm sure you're familiar with the One Health Initiative, but you're also maybe familiar with the bias that this One Health agenda has towards terrestrial systems. And so as aquatic biologists and aquatic veterinarians, we should be challenging the field to take this idea underwater and to understand the connections that clean ecosystems have with humans. So in 2013, I was in the School of Public Health at UAB, and a few papers came out that kind of changed my career, moving away from, not away from conservation, but to add to my conservation research program a component that deals with waterborne infectious diseases. And what we found, or what these researchers found, was that there's a bacterium that affects human populations throughout the tropics, as well as it affects fisheries in North America and around the world. And Hannah Pye, shown in the lower right-hand corner here, is an undergraduate in my lab who will show you more results about her surveys of this species of bacteria. And so Godzilla comes into this because a long time ago, an undergraduate showed this film to my lab, and she was a kaiju buff, these old Japanese movies, and we had a discussion afterwards about what is Godzilla. Godzilla comes from the water, and he has dorsal spines, lived underwater for hundreds of years, presumably without access to air, and so he must have breathed through gills, right? Godzilla is probably an amniote, and we know that the only amniotes that have gills as adults are fishes. Also, Godzilla had huge impacts on the fisheries. Problem was the decline in fisheries. And if we can relate this to this infectious disease that we're studying, it also has fisheries-related impacts that comes from the water. There's presumed to be a nuclear metaphor, or a metaphor for nuclear weapons, or maybe the United States, right? The movie Godzilla was thought to be representing these things, but I want to present it as a metaphor for waterborne infectious diseases. Some research that will be coming out of my lab very soon is a phylogeny of all acid-fast bacteria, which includes tuberculosis and these mycobacteria that we'll learn about in a minute. Kayla Fast, a research associate that has worked with me for about 8 years, has compiled some data on these phylogenies relating to the origin of the bacteria. And one of the things that you see is that many of these bacteria come from moist or aquatic environments, much like Godzilla. And there are 3 distinct clades shown here in yellow that are predisposed to be associated with organisms, particularly animals. And so the hypothesis that Kayla and I are testing with this research that will come out next year is the idea that aquatic-borne bacteria are the ancestral niche of a lot of the infectious diseases that are facing humans. And just like Godzilla, these are bacteria that cause a lot of problems once they leave the water. I'm not going to talk too much in detail about this disease because you'll hear about it from Kayla and Hannah today. But this is a very debilitating problem that affects public health and fisheries. So without further ado, I will stop my screen share and introduce you to Kayla Fast, Master of Science from Mississippi State University.
Thanks a lot. Dr. Sandel, if folks have a question or two for him before we move on. Sounds good. Well, I appreciated the connections between Godzilla, One Health, and nasty infectious pathogens. So thanks a lot for your presentation.